You're going to listen to Dion like you always do on Dion Talk Live.
As soon as I remind Christian that we have mics on, he doesn't need to scream.
Hello. Hey guys, welcome back. For those who are joining, we are here at the Robin Hood Village Resort. We bought this thing seller financed for no money out of pocket because we definitely had no money. We didn't even have the earnest money when we bought this place. Dion is here to talk about a few things. I'm assuming we're covering the binder strategy. We usually do.
Is there anybody here who doesn't know what the binder strategy is? Okay, so we will be covering a live version of the binder strategy at the end of this.
There we go. Dion has a chart here of the most elaborate cattle brand I've ever seen. He's going to talk about why he has that.
And you got to get it to join Yellowstone.
Get it, yeah, dude, that is going to be, I feel bad for that cow. There's a lot going on there on that brand. Really excited to have Dion here. Dion is another person who has made it to every single one of these events. This is very much like learning from Dion is part of the program. He has done he's another person who's done just a totally different strategy than Cody and I. And this is what I mean by multiple strategies work depending on what the goal is. Dion has a different goal than I do. He has a different goal than Cody did. He is financially free, and he's rich, and he mostly gets to do what you want, when you want, with who you want. And his strategy works to do that. So he's going to talk about how you can do that.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the invite back. You guys are slow learners. It really actually feels weird to me every time I come here and present because I am almost, I would say, the opposite of almost everybody here on several ways. One, I don't want a big portfolio. I actually have the goal of having the right amount of cash flow from the least amount of units. And I don't hear that really. I hear Cody and Christian and now talking about right sizing. And so some of that might turn into the right amount of units. But I am, like I said, the opposite. I have things like I don't raise my rents. My tenants do, which is going to be when we cover the binder strategy, how I'm able to find all of my deals from the MLS. No seller financing, no creative financing, no driving for dollars, no mailers, super boring, right from the MLS. All of my properties have either been purchased with a conventional loan or all cash on one. I'll actually talk about paying off a property costing me $1 million. So when I come out here and talk, this is people who usually want a large portfolio. Luckily, there's some people here who are just starting. And my goal is to maybe talk to people who think there isn't a right way to do this, but there is a right way for you. And something I say and something Christian says and something Cody says and something Caleb says and something Mike says, you can take that one thing from each of us to make the amalgamated form that works for you. So also, I rarely talk about this on YouTube, but I have some memory issues. So if my brain shuts off and I absolutely lose my train of thought, I have books up here. So if you catch me where I've lost my complete train of thought, I have to give somebody a book when that happens. These books are from Michael Zuber, One Rental at a Time. If you haven't heard of those, it's a great community to also join. The biggest difference between what Cody and Christian and Caleb and Millennial Mike and I do is you have two forms of growing a portfolio. One is defined by 4 words, matches me and my portfolio. Boring and not sexy. And then the other way is the Cody and Christian and Mike and Caleb way, where you grow a bigger portfolio faster. You can either recycle cash flow or you can recycle capital. If you recycle capital, you do some of the strategies you've heard the other guys talk about today, where you pull equity, where you turn one property into 3 properties, where you grow a bigger portfolio. And I'm actually going to talk about, I've never done a home equity line of credit. I've never done a cash out refinance. I've never sold a property for a 1031 exchange. My specific strategy is because I don't want to do any of those things. Because what those things will do is give you a bigger portfolio. And at the end, when the hockey stick growth hits, you will have more cash flow. But what I had was I wanted financial freedom in a decade. So I had a 10-year timeline. And I wanted it to be from the smallest amount of properties. So I'll start with the end in mind, just because I don't want to depress people with the beginning. The end is I retired in 2022 after 12 years of investing with 16 rental properties. At the time, I've added a duplex since then, that produce over $200,000 in pure cash flow. Pure cash flow means I pay the mortgages, I set aside money for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy. I pay the taxes, and what is left for me to spend on anything I want, I could burn it or I could live on it, is the cash flow. So it took 10 years to do that. The reason it can happen with 16 rentals is because the no HELOC, no cash out. When anybody talks about, and Eugene, you said this earlier, I would like to pull out equity. What I would like you to think about is redefining equity. People think of equity, if it's in the property, they call it dead equity. It's not doing anything for you. So people say, I want to pull out the equity. I want to redefine equity to, you have the ability to add debt to an existing asset. So if you can add debt to an asset and then acquire an asset that makes it worth it, sure, it makes sense. But since I wanted the least amount of units with the most amount of cash flow, I make more than $1,000 a door on my properties because I haven't touched the equity. It was slow. Now here's the beginning part that I usually depress people with. I found myself at 40, right? Never invested, never saved money, single parent, 3 kids, got laid off from law enforcement because of the 2008 housing crash. Cities aren't making money, so we don't need cops anymore, so they laid off a bunch of us. I found out about $89,000 in bad debt in my name I didn't know existed until the divorce. I started teaching at a CDL school making $17 an hour. So $89,000 bad debt, $17 an hour coming in, raising 3 kids. Not the best starting position. The reason I start with 12 years of investing I was able to retire is because I think the timeline for almost anybody can be 10 years. You might choose different strategies. You might go with Millennial Mike's strategy where you do BRRRRs. I've done one BRRRR. I did it after I retired. I call it my first and last BRRRR. I'll never do another. I hate it. Created $300,000 out of thin air that didn't exist. Never going to do it again. I completely lost my train of thought.
I use different people's strategies.
All right. Who's left-handed? Oh my goodness. You are? No? You are? I can't give you a book. You're the host. Okay. Who doesn't own any rentals again? We'll start with you. Okay. And you guys are together, so there you go. Okay. Sorry for that. Too many close explosions and Desert Storm. So this happens every now and then, and I will check my notes really quick.
First and last BRRRR.
First and last BRRRR. Because what was my goal? My goal was financial freedom. I should have given Mike the book because he knew where I was going with that. I wanted financial freedom, and I want to maybe cover when I asked Caleb earlier, what's your end goal? Is because I think, are there any gamers in here other than, okay. So when you start a video game, you think of how I want it to end. What do I want my end character build to be? Then you know what path to take to get there. Real estate is the same way. If Caleb wants to retire his parents, Cody wanted to retire his mom. If you know what your end goal is to retire your parents, you kind of know how to structure your thing. What I wanted, again, I'm the opposite of most people here. I do not want to create generational wealth. I'm actually the opposite of that. I don't want my kids thinking they're going to inherit anything. They don't watch my content, so this is okay. They're going to inherit millions. But if they knew that, I don't think they'd be motivated to do anything on their own. I have a niece and nephew. My nephew in a recent video actually says, all I got to do is wait for dad to die because he's got plenty of rentals. And that's the way they used to think until I explained, your dad's living longer than you thought, isn't he? This working thing's terrible. If you invest for 10 years, you can make work optional. I wanted financial freedom so I could have time freedom because this is called the math of time. And when you start investing, if you don't have a rental yet and you're looking at that in that first one, the first 5 years suck so much. I want you to have this kind of positive thought to think, okay, this is why I'll put up with these 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever your journey is. I think everybody can do it in 10. Because my bad starting position, I was able to do it in 10. You might be able to do it sooner. You can use the math of time to triple your life. So I retired in 2022. I'm going to use 2021, 2023. In 2021, I was working 50 or 60 hours a week. I was buying rentals. I was raising 3 kids. I was working 50 or 60 hours. I would have, at the end of the day, maybe 5 hours that were mine. Right? 5 hours where I'm exhausted. I'd have the weekends. One day to catch up on sleep, one day to get all of the kid list done of things I couldn't do during the week. So weekends were burnt, weeks sucked. I had 5 hours. So why do you think most people just watch Netflix, Hulu, binge a TV show, or play video games? Because that's all the energy we have at the end of a workday is to sit at a desk and barely do anything. Versus that's 2021, 5 hours a day where I'm exhausted. 2023, after I've retired. I no longer have to work. I no longer have to commute to work. I no longer have to prepare for work. I no longer have to answer emails until 10 o'clock at night. I no longer have to take the weekends to do the things I couldn't do during the week or take a catch-up day. I have 15 hours a day, because I still have to sleep, shop, work out, all those things. But 15 hours a day where I haven't been exhausted, other than our Vegas trip, in over 2 years. I haven't had a tired day. That's what you can do. If you reach financial freedom and it's not just getting your time back from work, but it's you triple the amount of time you have and you're not exhausted. So that's kind of the motivation when you think, should I invest in real estate? Should I drive this 20-year-old car? Should I not take vacations? All those first year things we have to do. Should you, Curtis, live in a place that doesn't have a shower and have a gym membership so you can go and shower and house hack your way to buy your first one so you can get into your second one where you now have your own unit? That year sucked, right? Okay. There's all these things that we do that just aren't fun to get to the point where when you retire, you have time freedom. Now what I do is I spend a few months in each country, Colombia, Thailand, Portugal, Florida, which is like the Australia of the United States, to scuba dive and enjoy things, living on the cash flow, which is over $200,000 that I don't have to get out of bed for. I specifically, to talk about the contrarian thing, I wanted to invest in a blue state, not a red state. Red states are landlord friendly. Blue states are tenant friendly. Why would you do that? Google later, not now, but Google, what is the highest appreciating state in the United States for the last 20 years? And there's no R. Washington. Washington State, 41%, because they limit building. Over $100,000 to break ground to move a shovel load of dirt to start building a property. So limited building, longer evictions, more appreciation happens, so I can have the right amount of cash flow from the least amount of units. We have appreciation here, which I've never touched, but we have cash flow here that increases too. So speaking of cash flow, there are people here who never owned a rental, and I wasn't going to talk about this today until I saw that number of hands that went up that don't currently own a rental. I want to talk about this thing that I call the real estate investing education timeline. This is your education timeline. And this is not to say that I think of people as kindergartners or high schoolers or anything, but I'm going to use the K through 12 model because that's what people understand. But when we're a kindergartner, when we first think, I would like to own rentals, our brain goes, and you will hear this question, and when you hear this question, you will know this person is brand new. How many doors do you have? When somebody says, you're a rental? I mean, you have 12 doors? 10? Okay. You have 10 doors. So the new person goes, you have 10. And then I go, Caleb, how many doors do you have?
79.
79. Well, obviously, Caleb's doing better. What if they're losing $100 a month on each rental? $1,000 a month is better than $7,900 a month. So now the numbers look the opposite just because we looked at what the cash flow is. So when you're in kindergarten, we hear the question, how many doors do you have? When somebody moves on to elementary school, 5th or 6th grade, they start learning that cash can come in, there can be negative integers, cash can go out. How much money do you make per door? This doesn't tell you if it's a good or a bad deal. The education has slowly evolved to the next step. They'll go, how much money do you make per door? I make $200 a door. We saw the math earlier from Millennial Mike, which is great real estate math, by the way. $850 minus $343 is $250. That's real estate math. That's how it works. Because so many people would go, oh, it's around $500 because it's really close. No, you got to set aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy. This number gets smaller quicker. So Mike was very accurate with what he did with what's called real estate math. What's the cash flow? That doesn't tell you if it's a good deal or not. The thing of Mike's equation that made it a good deal was how much did he invest? When you move into high school, you learn about yield. How much did you invest to buy the property versus how much do you make? So if you use a GI Bill, VA loan, you buy a property putting $0 down and you make $100 a month, it's called an infinite return. So that would be good, right? $100 a month would be good. If you invest $1 billion and you make $100 a month, is that good? No, that's not good, right? So at this point, you learn what yield is. How much do you invest? So you take annual profit, this is the math equation, annual profit divided by cost to acquire. The annual profit is all the money that comes in, rent, parking, pets, laundry, whatever it is, any money that's coming in, minus your expenses. Principal, interest, taxes, insurance, setting aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy, property management, HOA, whatever there could be expenses coming out, what's left is profit. Divide that by your cost to acquire. Cost to acquire is down payment, closing costs, money for immediate repairs. How much did it cost to fix it up? How much did you put into it? That gives you a yield of 5%, 10%, 15%, depending on your area. Your math, Mike, was 20-something% there. I forgot if we did the math on that.
I think it was something like 20% cash on cash.
Right. So is 20% good? You don't know. What you have to do, and you take this right out of the Michael Zuber One Rental at a Time book, is you study for 3 to 6 months your local market to figure out most deals lose money, some deals make money, and the ones that make money, what's their average yield? Beat that. If you study a market and most places get you a 5% yield, look for a 7. Here in Washington State, I was consistently finding in the 2013 to 2020, 8%, 7%. So I hunted for 10s. Then things got challenging after COVID, and I thought, okay, a little bit lower yield might be okay, right? So you learn the area average, you go up or down based on that. And the reason you want to beat that area average, we used to say it's to protect you from, it's to make sure you get a good deal. And our friend Lumberjack Landlord pointed out it protects you from getting a bad deal. So as long as you're beating area average and it's positive, that's what I would do. But the reason this is K through 12 is because in all of this time, you should not buy any rentals. If you think door count matters, don't buy a rental. If you think how much money I make per door matters, don't buy a rental. If you think my yield is all I got to do is find a good yield, don't buy a rental. When you graduate high school and you move out here, because this is where life happens, this is where you can join the military, get a job, go to college, live on your parents, get married, or be smart. You can have all these different choices. This is when you can buy rentals because you need to look at the market. Do you have trusted boots on the ground? Are there enough economic drivers to supply tenants for you? Is population growing or shrinking? What's the crime like? What's the insurance specialties too if you invest in Florida versus Texas? What's the taxes? This is your market. You pick the one that makes sense for you. Then you'll need to look at the property. Does the property match your strategy? If you're investing for Cody's net operating income model that he was doing the genie magic math over here a few minutes ago, where if you increase the income, decrease the expenses, you add hundreds of thousands of dollars to your equity, right? That's a model that grows equity. Well, small multifamily, 4 units or less, is not going to help because our value is based on comps, not net operating income. So does the property match your strategy? So for me, I'm lazy. I wanted financial freedom from the fewest amount of rentals. So I wanted low tenant turnover. So I specifically targeted properties that maintain tenant turnover. So I want side-by-side small multifamily, not over-under, right? Less noise complaints. A plumbing issue only if it hits one tenant, not two. I want garages in the middle so they don't even share a wall of sound. I want pet-friendly fenced yards, washer-dryer hookups, at least 2 bedrooms in a garage because more stuff means more space, less likely to move. My strategy and my property had to align in the market that I invest in. My market, should I invest out of state with Mike or should I invest locally in Washington? Knowing my strategy, my goal, knowing what my character should end like to know the path to get there, I knew that I wanted the least amount of units. If I went to Gary, Indiana, where he started with $250 cash flow and got it up to, I forget what the math was, 500 or 600, right? I started in Washington where the cash flow was 500 or 600, and after 2 or 3 years, it's $1,200 or $1,300 per unit. Fewer numbers, bigger cash flow. He will have a larger portfolio, and when the hockey stick growth kicks in at the end, he will have bigger portfolio, bigger cash flow. It's a bigger end result. That wasn't my goal. My goal was financial freedom, which happened in a decade from the least amount of units. Who's from the farthest away? Who's from the farthest away from here? Nobody? Minnesota?
So we'll have to pass.
Oh, okay, so you guys passed.
From Hawaii.
From Hawaii. But you're the host, so you got this twice.
I'm from Virginia.
From Virginia?
No, not me.
Virginia's far away, right? There you go. Okay. I have to check my notes to see where I was at. Okay, we'll do questions before the binder strategy. And for the binder strategy, who here has never heard of the binder strategy before today? Who here wants to be a volunteer? You've heard of it before. That's cheating, Dave. You'll be the volunteer? Okay. All right, so after questions, you're my binder volunteer. Okay. We will do that up here. So we'll start with open questions.
Do you think that you would still have the same mindset and strategy with, like, I love having the smallest portfolio and optimizing it versus having a huge portfolio. Do you think you would still do that model if you were like Caleb or Cody's age?
Full transparency. If I was Cody or Christian's age, Christian, Cody, Caleb, all three of them, they're 30-ish or younger, I would invest in stocks. I didn't have the decades of income of time for compound interest to do its thing, and I didn't have the income to invest in stocks to make it matter. So I chose real estate because it matched my timeline and it matched my skill set and it matched my thing. So if I was their age, me personally, because I've always been lazy, yes, I would have went the same route that I did. But if you're their age, and this is something I hear often, is Cody could lose everything and start over and still retire and lose everything and start over probably 3 or 4 times and retire before 50. I didn't start until 40, retired at 52. Starting over now would put me in my 60s. So at their age, I'd be a little more risk tolerant if I went with the real estate route to probably, personally though, to answer your question, honestly, no. I would still go with 30-year fixed rate debt. I don't like balloon payments. I don't like, the worst thing for me is what's called a loan reevaluation period. I don't want my 1 year where I get my loans looked at for somebody to go, you have leases renewing this year, so you have to either sell, write us a 6-figure check, or refinance the property. I fire off a mortgage, and the last thing I want to do is think about it again. I never want to pay it off early. I never want to think about it. I might refinance if rates drop, like in 2020. I refinanced everything I owned before that to that 3% rate. So.
Would you start over again? If you had to start over today, would you do the same strategy with today's interest rates?
Yeah, interest rates are exactly where they were when I started, 8. I started with 8s in 13, 14, 8s in 2018. My wage was significantly less than what you can get a remote job now for $24 an hour. I was making 17, working all day long in a CDA in a truck. So this, okay, I wasn't going to put this, and I definitely don't want to put this on YouTube, but I want to be honest. I didn't come here to make friends. I came here to make your life easier. It's easier to buy a house today than it was in 2000. You can fight me all you want. In 2000, I bought a house. Before I was an investor, I bought a house, picket fence to raise the kids in. $100,000. I paid $98,000 for it. Right now, I could sell it for $4 million. So it's gone up 4 times. Have wages increased 4 times? No. So everybody goes, oh, it's way harder to buy now, right? It's 4 times more to buy, but your wages haven't gone up 4 times. I bought in Yelm, Washington, that had a blinking light. It was 45 minutes to the closest gas station. It was an hour plus to the closest movie theater. There was no Walmart. There was no Lowe's. There was no Home Depot. Right now, you can open up Washington, the highest appreciated state in the last 20 years, and you can find properties for under $100,000 that are 45 minutes to the closest gas station. People now want to go on Zillow, find a walkability score, and pay what we paid 20, 30 years ago. People now want to own in the cities because Yelm grew up. It's got a movie theater. It's got a Walmart. It's got traffic lights, Safeway, 20 different restaurants, 15 weed stores. Right? The whole town's grown. So of course it's $400,000 now. But now go out to Clearview, 45 minutes to the closest store, $100,000 properties. It's easier to buy a house today than it was 25 years ago. Just not where everybody wants to live.
So you just mentioned when it comes to houses, buying houses, for example, side by side, because of it not on the top of the list, restraints and complaints and whatnot. What are 3 to 5 other kind of tips or things to avoid when, say, buying a house to kind of consider those style of attributes?
Okay, the first thing is, does it match your strategy? And if you're here at the multifamily strategy, you're probably looking for multifamily. So most important thing is parking. I've got a friend, Chester, who's probably in the comments because he usually is. He spent a couple of years hunting for the perfect property to do rent by the room, and every deal was blown up because there wasn't parking. So does it match your strategy? For me, I like low tenant turnover. So is that part of your strategy? So I would go not only pet-friendly fenced yards, but allow pets. It does a couple things. One, you get to charge a premium on your rent, not just the pet fee, because there's so few places that people can rent with pets. You get to charge the pet fee. In over a decade of investing, I've had one pet damage issue that was less than $200, and I've had tens of thousands of dollars in kid damage. So here is, sucks that we're on YouTube. Here is legal discrimination that you can do. I specifically do not want to own in good school districts. Good school districts do two things. The school district's good because they have a lot of tax money. Where does the tax money come from? Your property taxes, which are higher than everywhere else. Second, you're dating your tenants. You're saying, hey, when this kid's out of middle school and you don't like the way the high school is, you're going to move. Most of my tenants have been in their properties over 20 years. 26 years, then I bought the property, still there, right? They just stay because they're not there because of the school district. I don't go in and rip out bathtubs when I buy a place, but if I own a place and there is any bathroom work to do, I put in a walk-in shower, no bathtubs. Bathtubs means more likely to allow kids because you want a kid-free bathtub. Legal discrimination. I will rent to people with kids. I've got 2 tenants that have kids, and that's where all my damage is. They just had $1,200 in pipe repair done a couple months ago because of otter pop lids of plastic filled a 12-foot section of pipe. So I will rent to people with kids, but I'm targeting properties that don't pull in people with kids. They're not in the school zones. They don't have the way they're looking for. So pet friendly, parking. When my portfolio was small, now this is a group of people who's generally going to go out and you buy a 25 unit and house hack it in Texas, like Caleb, right? It's a possibility. I bought duplexes. It was 2 years to buy one, 2 years to buy another, year and a half to buy a third. So 5.5 years, I bought 3 things. It starts real slow. I made sure they were more than 10 miles apart. Because I talk about wanting to buy a property in a market, which I can't see here now, I pointed out like a goober. I want several economic drivers, like a base, a port, a college, a hospital, Boeing, or Amazon, or a high population, right? So I'm buying in a place that has all these ways to get tenants. I didn't want to own 10 units in one space. I wanted 5 duplexes, 10 miles apart. So Boeing can move away. There could be a BRAC meeting. JBLM can close down. I've still got the port. I've got the hologist. So that was my thing. My portfolio was really small. If you're buying the bigger units and you buy several different bigger ones in different markets, you're protecting yourself. So with small multifamily, that's what matches my strategy. That wouldn't match a strategy for larger portfolios. Hopefully that was a list for you to start with.
Yeah, it's a good list.
Okay.
Stuff we can consider.
We're good on questions?
Was there any cash flow initially with the deals that you did? Because it seems like your strategy really is appreciation over time and then rent appreciation.
Rent appreciation. Since I've never touched appreciation, it's effective. If I didn't make YouTube videos, I would have no idea that my net worth tripled in the last 3 years. So here's the cash flow timeline. I live in a house. I move into an apartment to rent my house out because I have a bad debt to income ratio. So, and there was, who was I talking to that is doing the exact same thing right now? You moved out to rent out your place. So 2 years of rental income on my tax returns meant that the next place I buy, they'll look at the rental income on my debt to income ratio. So even though I had the bad debt, low income, I was able to buy a duplex. So I go from an apartment that's $1,500 a month. I was renting the house out at a loss because I rented it out for the mortgage costs, which meant I wasn't setting aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy. I lost $6,000 the first year because I rented. In the beginning, I was like, I'm not a real landlord. I'm just trying this out. So I don't want to trust a stranger. I'm going to rent to a friend. I'm renting to a friend. I don't need a lease. Who has a lease with their friend, right? He's a single parent. I'm a single parent. So when rent was late, that seems normal. Late became never. When I went to the house to talk to him, I was like, hey, why aren't you paying your rent? He wasn't there because he moved out. He rented the place to someone else and was collecting the rent. First year was terrible, right? It's kind of one of the reasons why I'm trying to share information so other people can skip that year. And that, what does Christian call it? The idiot tax, right?
Stupid tax.
The stupid tax. There you go. Close enough. We could say idiot and we could say stupid. We're not using the R word anymore. I'm trying to keep up. So there you go. I rent the house out. I finally start making money on the house, probably $200 because that mortgage was $1,000. I rented it for $14. Set aside $200. I was making $2. When I moved into the duplex, the first one, I went from $1,500 a month that I was paying to I was then paying $300 a month. So I didn't get my first house hack, live for free, but I was saving $1,200 a month. And when you're making $17 an hour, $1,200 a month is huge. That over doubled what I could save every month. 2 years later, I've by this point learned the binder strategy that we're going to go over here in a few minutes. and I buy a duplex. The house is cash flowing. Duplex that I'm in stays the same. The new duplex is cash flowing about $800, so $400 each side. And then I made a huge mistake. No, I bought another duplex, same thing, probably $400 each side. But here's the magic. Here's why it takes 10 years. If you had $1 million right now and you can go out and buy 10 duplexes, that would not set you free. But if you bought 10 duplexes over 10 years, it would, because I owned the house for 10 years of renting. I owned that first duplex for 8 years of renting. I owned the next one for 6 years. So that's where the compound interest of rent increases comes from. Where rents, I mean, you can Google it, since 1940, rents have never once, ever in the United States gone down. We've had Class A in 2009. It took a dip because Class A properties, the luxury is the first thing to go. But Class C, so I guess that's something else I should cover. Class C properties, in bad times, there's more demand. So when you look at, you want to look at the market and the type of property, I target Class C properties. I don't want high end. I don't want war zone. So Class D is a war zone. Class A is like gated community, the best school districts, all of those things, doorman or whatever. I want Class C. I want the working class people. Because if an IT guy that makes $200,000 a year gets laid off, it's really hard to replace your job and make $200,000 a year. Unemployment won't cover your bills. But if my Class C property, where they're making $50,000 a year, gets laid off, unemployment covers their bills, it's kind of easy to go find another $50,000 a year job. So in bad times, my properties actually had more demand.
Thank you.
Yeah. So for making sure there's no more questions before we go to the binder strategy, how are we on?
We're good.
Good, okay.
Great.
2 chairs. Are there 2 chairs available? Thank you.
Put this on them so
Yep. Thanks.
just click that like
I think that's why I moved this up. I'm Dion.
Dion, I'm Dennis.
Dennis, nice to meet you, Dennis. For this, we're going to pretend you're one of my tenants. I just bought the property. Okay, you live in a duplex. Rents are $1,400. You're paying currently $1,400.
Okay.
Most tenants live in fear that somebody's going to buy the house, kick them out, go, look, I just bought this. I have to live here. It's owner occupied, so I'm going to house hack, right? So you got to get out. That's a possibility. They also live in the fear of, I just bought this place. Your rent's going to $2,000.
Okay.
That would suck. If I came in, Dennis, and I said, hey, you're paying $1,400 a month. I'm the new owner. I need you to go to $1,500 a month. I'm kind of a jerk. We just met. I'm costing him $100 a month. So if I raise it $100 a month, that sucks. But if I come in, and the reason this is called a binder is because I do it with a 3-ring binder. I physically have a 3-ring binder in between us. You can do this through text with the housing authority. I do this through emails. So this works in several different formats. Cody does this with a spreadsheet with all of the data because it's a larger portfolio than mine. So I pull out the portfolio or the binder and I show you the front page. It's a picture of the property that you live in and what I paid for it. Now, some people will go, what does that matter? It shows transparency. He can go on Redfin, Zillow next month and find out what somebody bought the property for, look up his own address. So people know that. But I'm showing him, I'm going, look, you've lived here for a while, $1,400 made sense to the previous owner. But my property taxes and my insurance are going to be based on this new amount that I've paid. They probably paid $200,000, I paid $600,000, right? So my expenses are a lot more than theirs were. I haven't talked about rent yet. I just point that out. Mostly it's because it shows this is data. Everything I'm going to talk about is something you can look up yourself. So then I flip through the next page. The next page is a map of the area with all of the rentals, little pinprick maps on apartments.com of all the rentals. I open the next page and I show him. So currently your rent is at $1,400. Section 8 for your area for a 2-bedroom in Pierce County, Washington, you pay $1,987. So if you move out, I can rent to the government. They can put a tenant in here for $1,987. You're at $1,400. But don't worry, I don't want to raise your rent to $1,987. That'd be too much. Then I flip to the next page and I show 5 or 6 properties that are for rent in the area from anywhere from $1,900 to 21, maybe 2150. This is actually the numbers from the last binder strategy I did with a nice lady. And I pull this up and I go, so Section 8 will pay this. I'm showing you several rentals. It's important that they're the same number of bedrooms, same number of bathrooms, right? Same kind of area. So if the government will pay me $1987, if I can rent this place out for $2,000, $2,100, I don't want to kick you out, right? I'm not buying this to move in. I don't want to displace you. I might not say this to the tenant, but I also don't want to do a full rehab. I don't want to have to put in paint, flooring, update the electric, right? That's in my head. But I go, look, I don't want you to leave. I don't want you to stay here. But the $1,400 made sense to the previous owner. It's kind of why they had to sell. If this is what the government would pay, and this is what I could rent for in this area, and you're paying $1,400, what do you think would be fair? That's the magic question. Actually, end my conversation part of it with, what do you think, Dennis, would be fair for you to pay for rent? So giving these numbers, you don't want to move. I don't want you to move. What would be fair?
1,800.
Last lady suggested 1,850. So you were like this close. So Dennis says 1,800. And what I did for the nice lady who doesn't have the interwebs at her house, literally writes out 6 months worth of checks, and I just pick them up once every 6 months because I'm not going to make her learn an app or anything. She suggested 1,850. You suggest 1,800. I said, that'd be really cool. How about we go to 17? So it was 150 less than her, 100 less than you. If I walked in the door and I said, I'm going to raise your rent $100, I'm a jerk. You suggest 18, and I go, hey, that'd be cool. How's 17 feel? Pretty good. You save $100. Then I'm going to go and wrap it up with one little last thing on the bow that makes the tenant really happy. It is November. So I'll tell you what, December, we're going to leave it at 14. January, we'll leave it at 14. It's kind of like you just got $300 a month for 2 months. I'm giving you $600 basically. We'll just leave it the same. February 1st, we go to the new amount. Sound fair?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll get the lease written up. We'll sign it. The tenant got the rent lower than what they suggested. The tenant got 2 months at the current rent. And what I actually did is I met the Washington state requirement to give 60 days notice on a rent increase. I didn't have to say it that way. I say it this way. Super happy tenant. Now, when Cody does this to his property and the rents go from $700 to $800, $100 on 8 units, each unit adding $15,000 in equity because of the way the net operating income works for a rental, 15 times 8 is 150, 120. There you go. That's why Cody's the man. There you go. $120,000 created by having 8 10-minute conversations. I've had sometimes tenants offer too much, and I bring them down a little, and I go, like, that'd be great. I'd be happier at 18, but $300 is a huge jump. I don't want to do that to somebody. I've had tenants go up 500, and it was because they were at the 600 or 700 range, and they went to 12, and rents were really 2,000. So that was a big jump, but it wasn't as big as if I kicked them out and went the way most landlords do. What I have had every now and then is somebody go, I'm at 14, how about 15? So then what I would do is I would draw a line there and a line here, and I would say, you're at 14. This is the 2,000 I can get. You want to go to 15. That does seem fair to you. Like a physical representation of the distance here. And then they will usually split the difference. I've only had that, I think, once or twice. But if you go to YouTube and you look at binder strategy, there are hundreds and hundreds of people. Curtis, can we go over the numbers of your last binder strategy?
The first one? Yeah.
Sure, the first one.
So I bought the duplex. The guy was currently paying $990, which for Tacoma is very low for a 2-bed. I went over there. He kept the place nice. It was a very nice home, and didn't get any complaints. Yep. I didn't get any complaints from him. I took the satellite dish off the roof because I guess when the wind blows, it would hit it, make him upset. So he was happy. And then once I saw he was good like a tenant, I asked him, "Well, do you want to renew?" He said yes. I said, "Well."
And I'm sorry, what was the rent the first time?
$990. Okay. I said, "Do you want to renew?" He said yes. I said, "Okay, but what you're currently paying is very low compared to the area average." So went through the whole binder, and I said, "Okay, so what do you think would be fair?" And there was a long pause. It was kind of awkward. And then he was like, 1,500. Great. Then we signed the lease. So 990 to 1,500, and he was happy.
So yeah, 990 to 1,500. Happy tenant. Happy tenants don't trash your property. Happy tenants don't leave. Any questions on the binder strategy?
I have a question.
Okay.
Do you do this long-term tenants, 10 years plus? How often do you go back and re-raise?
Okay. So here's the time. Thank you. If I had another book, Mike. If I had another book.
Ebook, email.
Ebook. So if anybody isn't already irritated by the sound of my voice, I also narrated this book for Zuber on Audible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sign it.
I will sign it. Yeah, sure. Okay, I'll sign it before we leave. If I had another book, I'd have to give it away. Oh, the timeline. Thank you. I don't do the binder strategy right after we close. I'd wait about 2 months because I don't know if Dennis is a good tenant. Maybe he doesn't pay on time. Maybe I get noise complaints. Maybe he calls me for all kinds of stuff, right? But 2 months of good tenant pays time on time. I put in motion sensor LED lights. I put in coded locks. I look through the inspection report to see if there's anything that need to be fixed. I actually asked Dennis, hey, you live here. If you own the place, what would you fix? And I've never had a tenant say I'd add a bedroom or I'd pave the driveway. It's like, I'd really like screens. There's no screens downstairs. So I put in screens or a screen door or something. So now Dennis knows I'm going to take care of the place. There's been some upgrades. 2 months later, I know he's a good tenant. The conversation goes better because they know the last landlord wasn't fixing anything and I'm taking care of the place. So then I generally wouldn't do the binder strategy again. I would go binder strategy, then every other year I was doing 5% increase. So you'd get 2 years, you get a year with nothing and then a year with a 5%. But then in 2020, we have a pandemic, an eviction moratorium, a stock market crash, and you can't do a rent increase. So in 2021, I binder strategy every tenant. Most of them had been already binder strategy because I bought the place that they were in. Then in 22 and 23, I wasn't going to raise the rent, but in 23, Washington State, where there isn't an R, threatened, didn't even pass committee, but they threatened rent control. Rent control makes owners richer. So in 2023, I went through and binder strategied all my tenants again. I normally would do just a 5% increase, call it good for 2 years. But because the state threatened rent control, which would limit the amount I could do increases on, so I couldn't fix things like a massive jump in insurance or property taxes in the future, I did it again. I'm making $3,300 more a month in all through 2024 because I bindered in 2023 existing tenants that had already been bindered. I actually went to the one, and this one where she suggested 1850, she was bindered when I bought it. Went to her earlier this year. She had the data. She was like, I went on, I looked up, I found some 1850s. I'd like to go there. And those were like the really low ones. And that's why I still brought it down to the 1700. So the tenants know I've got tenants who watch my content. I've had them in the comments go, absolutely. He binder strategized me like 2 months ago. My rent's way below the area average. I'm super happy. So that's kind of the timeline. Do it once, every other year, 5% increase, which is normal for my area, might be not normal for your area. But then watch for black swan events, something random that you don't have control over, and then binder strategy everybody again.
Makes sense.
Cool.
On that same note, would you say a binder strategy every 5 years and a lack of black swan events every 5 or 6 years?
So if rents did a big spike, sure. If they don't, 5% every other year. So then in 4 years you would have done 5%, 6 years you'd have done 5%. That would keep me up. That kept me from 2013 until 2021. That was the first time I think I'd ever binder strategy to tenant the second time.
That's more like once every 10 years do a binder strategy.
Yeah, something like that.
If the tenant leaves for whatever reason, do you make some updates and they put out a market, right?
So if a tenant leaves,
Say they bought a house.
a huge mistake that landlords do, and my brother did this last year. He had a tenant move out that was at really low rents. It was in California, and he just did the binder strategy for the first time this month, right? He's retired with 10 paid off rentals. He had a tenant that he's got some at 600 or 700, and the area average is 1,500. He's had these since 2006 and that's never raised the rent. He had a tenant move out. He fixed everything up, and he was like, they were at 650, so I'll list the new one at 800. Area average is 15, but in his mind, he went from 650 to 800, is a $150 increase. So here's what I want everyone to understand. Rent has nothing to do with what someone paid for rent last year or what your expenses are. Your expenses, like when I explained, here's what I paid, my taxes and insurance got, the tenant doesn't care. If people cared about your expenses, a house with a mortgage and a paid off house would rent for different amounts. But how many renters even know if their landlord has a mortgage, right? So they don't care about your expenses. Area average rents set rents. And that's where the binder strategy comes in. What is Section 8 paying? Every October, they come out with the information for next year. In 2024, it was a massive increase here in Washington. This year, it's almost staying flat from 24 to 25. But last year, it was about a 30% increase. I had a Section 8 tenant went from 2,200 to 3,000. Like, whatever the government's going to pay. So I guess if there's any more questions, we'll cover it. But the one last thing I wanted to cover that I just reminded myself of is, thank you, Dennis. There you go. A form of diversification. So I talked about having my properties at least 10 miles apart. I want about 1/3 military, 1/3 Section 8, and 1/3 working or retired. So that if there's a pandemic, a stock market crash, anything, my entire portfolio is not hit. So if you're brand new and you're thinking about this, Millennial Mike, in Gary, Indiana, you're 100% Section 8, right?
Like 80.
80, okay.
I think 2 or 3 regular tenants.
So if it's normal for the area and you're investing out of state and that's what makes sense, sure. But investing locally for here, I like to have, a third military is great, but what if there's a base realignment and closure meeting and JBLM goes away? I'm going to want my Boeing, my COPS, my whatever. So 1/3 Section 8. I like the Section 8 program, but I don't want to be more into it because at some point we could have a regime change in politics and there could be less money for Section 8. I don't think it'll ever go down or there'll be less, but there could be not as many vouchers coming out or not as much of an increase in the future. So I wouldn't want to be tied to that. So I hope this information has helped everybody. Yes.
I was going to ask you about all your properties. Are they under one?
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I love those.
Already gave you a book. So you would definitely get a book for this question. The question is, I will repeat it for the people on YouTube. Are all of my properties under one LLC? Can I pick on you? Do you trust me enough to pick on you a little bit?
Go ahead.
Okay. Why would I have them in an LLC? Just tell me just the common reason why. Why do people put them in an LLC?
It's just a business strategy. I mean, it's what I've heard that you do.
You've heard that you do it, right? Right? Okay. So the reason I literally want to grab a soapbox and stand on it about the LLC thing is because if you go into Facebook or BiggerPockets or one of those groups and you ask this question, you're going to get people who've never owned a rental go, you want an LLC for every property, for the tax benefits, for the asset protection, for the business structure. So I want to be very clear. This is why I get upset. You don't own a rental yet. So if you got an LLC, you have to name it, you have to file it. Are you familiar with the Transparency Act of 2024? If you don't file the right paperwork with your LLC, it's $500 a day fine and a bunch of prison time or something, right? So this is a new thing from this year. So how do you pay yourself from your LLC? How do you make sure you're not commingling finances from personal expenses to rental or rental to rental in another LLC? Like you put this mountain of stop you in your tracks if you think you need an LLC. So 12 years of investing, 18 rental properties, financial freedom, completely retired. None of my properties are in an LLC. None of them ever will be. There are 0 tax benefits. In 1996, the IRS made a decision, a determination, and you can Google it too, it's 1996, the IRS decision that all sole proprietor, meaning you and your spouse, so if you have partners, you need an LLC. If your lender requires an LLC to get the loan for the property that you're doing, you need an LLC. But there are no tax benefits. The IRS determined all sole proprietor LLCs disregarded entities. So in the counties where I invest, they use the 1996 IRS precedents that all sole proprietor LLCs don't exist. They're disregarded entities. For a long time, people could pierce the veil. If you commingled your finances, the judge could say, well, if you get sued, those are all your assets. Now, if you're sued, all of your assets are your LLCs, and they're all at risk. So there's no asset protection from having an LLC unless you have partners. The limited liability company protects you from someone else's mistakes. So if you partner outside of your marriage, for real estate, then you want an LLC. Some lenders for hard money will say, yes, if you do this in an LLC, it's easier for me to separate it from your other assets, then we'll do this. So if lending requires it, sure. but there's no asset protection. There's no tax benefits. There are 3 forms of asset protection that I do use. The first one is insurance, right? So property insurance on every one of your properties, full replacement value, and then $300,000 in injury coverage. Then after I had 3 or 4 properties, it was at 4 properties, I added an umbrella policy. So if I get sued and it goes above the $300,000, the umbrella policy kicks in. I got $2 million in coverage for like $550 a month or something when I first got it. A year, not a month. Yeah, it was a year. Now it's like $630 a year or something. That's the first one, is insurance. Second one is leverage. I was talking with Eugene earlier. The last thing I want to do is pay off a property, because if you get sued, your property's at risk. If I have a mortgage on a property, the bank is in first position, so my property's not at risk. The third form of asset protection is the most important one once you own rentals. Fix stuff. Be proactive. Have walkthroughs done, either you or your handyman or contractors. Are banisters safe? Is the flooring solid? All the things that can cause an injury, you actually fix. And if a tenant calls with any kind of complaint, you fix it in a timely manner. So when you asked the question earlier, are all of your properties in an LLC? I have a small portfolio, and I say no. So Michael Zuber, 1 rental at a time, the book you got. Over 180 rentals, 0 LLCs, except for the partnerships he's done. Lumberjack Landlord, 140 rentals, 0 LLCs, except for the one he made for healthcare when he retired. Like, so there are times to have an LLC. None of those times are the ones most people think they're for. So, thank you. Dave.
I don't know if you did or if you were going to share about your $1 million mistake.
The $1 million mistake? Yeah. Quickest timeline, because I don't know how much time we're looking at here. We're good. Just I'm sure. All right. So here's how I lost $1 million. My favorite story. Actually, all the marriages are the favorite story. But here's how I lost $1 million. In 2018, I decided to pay off a house, because you were allowed to have 4 mortgages in your name, and I had 4. And I figured if I paid one off, I'd have a spot for a new mortgage. So I picked my lowest value, highest interest rate. So it hit the debt avalanche, it hit the debt snowball. It was $121,000 I owed on a house. Paid it off. Every penny from rental income, every penny from overtime and side hustle, paid it off. In 2020, I bought a 4-plex. 4-plex was $590. It was about $109,000 down to buy it, because I did owner occupied, 20% down. So less than $121,000. That property has appreciated over $1 million in the last 3 years. Between 2018 and 2020, I could have bought another 4-plex that would have appreciated $1 million. That cash flow is $5,000 a month, more than $5,000 a month now. So I'm losing $60,000 a year to have a paid off property. Now I do have a paid off property. It's the one rented to a Section 8 tenant for $3,000 a month. I mean, like, I'm making money on it, but it didn't appreciate. If I had taken the money, I would have started a new depreciation schedule. No taxes on any of my, I've still never paid a penny in rental income tax. Paying off that house, it's now at risk. There's no asset protection from having a lender. And it's not even just asset protection. Let's say a tree falls on your house. If you have a mortgage, the insurance company knows there's a bank involved. If it's paid off, it's you against the insurance company. Like, it's not just you're going to get sued. Like, there's all these reasons why I don't want to have a paid off property. So paying it off, I lost $1 million. I don't regret it, because like me and Mike have both worked in law enforcement. A cop is allowed to make a decision based on the information they have at the time. At the time, I was allowed to have 4 mortgages. At the time, I had financial security from having a better equity position. Like, at the time, it hit debt avalanche, debt snowball. But looking back, hindsight being 2020, I can go, I'd really like to have $1 million and another $5,000 in cash flow every month. So that was a mistake.
Last question.
Okay.
I hope. Did any of your tenants not pay rent during COVID?
I have not had a late or missing rent payment in over 10 years since that first tenant. 2 reasons. One, I have the conversation with every tenant when I'm signing the lease. Here's how this works. We have a lease. If you ever need to pay your rent late, you totally can. It's in the lease. You're allowed to. It says it's $20 a day. You pay a late fee. So if you ever have a life emergency, I understand you need to pay your rent late. It'd be nice if you texted me and let me know. Okay. However, if you ever do pay your rent late, as a favor to you, and this makes me sound like a jerk, but as a favor to you, I file eviction. Like, if it's due on the 1st, late on the 5th, on the 6th, I'm filing for eviction as a favor. Because there's rent relief programs out there that won't talk to you until you've been served with an eviction paper. So if you have a life event that's going to make you pay your rent late, you can absolutely do it. We have a lease that says, but I'm going to start the eviction process so you can go out and apply for help. So that deters it, because they know I'm instantly going to file it, thinking it's a favor to them, which it is, because they can now go talk to those. But I'm not going to, because they want to rent from a private owner, because they can play on your emotions, right? The second thing is I have a conversation of the math of time. Earlier, we talked about the math of time you could triple your life. This is the math of time for tenants because they've never thought of it this way before. How many people in here are renting? That was a couple. Okay, so you're renting. You normally have 4 weeks to get the rent together for next month. 4-ish weeks, maybe a little bit longer, right? So I understand, tenant, if you want to pay your rent a week late, it makes today easier. You have another week to get things situated. But you normally have 4 weeks, and it's not easy to get the rent together. But what you're doing is now, if we take this week and you lose it, next month you only have 3 weeks to get your rent together. I would be setting you up for a spiral to get an actual eviction. I have that conversation with every tenant, and I've had that conversation with this one tenant like 3 times because she's called, I just need to pay the rent. You absolutely can. I'm going to file eviction. You can pay the late fees, and you're going to have less time. As soon as I do that, she's like, oh, that's right. Like she forgets the conversation, and then she pays her rent. Because what's a tenant doing? If I don't pay my cell phone bill, I can't do it. If I don't pay for Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, internet, all these things happen. If I don't pay for my car, they repossess it. But what about rent? Maybe if I just push that off a little, life's better. And you have a clear communication with them, 10 years. And so even in COVID, to answer your specific question, did I have a missing rent payment in COVID? In April of 2020, when everybody was the most uncertain, I went to all my tenants and said, hey, how about we do $200 off the rent this month because nobody's sure what's going on. Some people laid off going on unemployment. We didn't know you were going to make more money. The average income in Washington State went to $75,000 because you got unemployment, extended unemployment, extra unemployment, and stimulus. Yeah. So about half my tenants said thanks, paid $200 less because I offered it. Half my tenants said no thanks, we're okay. I offered a $200 discount to my tenants because the relationship with the binder, having a good relationship with the tenants, they're like, no, we'll just pay the regular amount. So even during that time, not one missing payment. Cool. And Christian is not in here for me to turn it over, but I think everybody should stand up because I've only put 9 of you to sleep. So, thank you. As Mike turns it off. Parting words. Can't drink all day unless you start early.